Welcome to the show. What does it take to be an entrepreneur? Technology companies are in the spotlight, and they're rather good for the recovery. It's very apparent in London, where they account for 30% of the jobs growth since 2009. Tech jobs are up about 1/5 against the backdrop of overall jobs growth in the UK of just 0.3%. I went to Silicon Roundabout to meet one of those tech entrepreneurs. Many of us think about starting a company, but few do it. Everyone here, though, at London's Silicon Roundabout, has started a tech company. What does it take to start your own firm? First, you need an idea. Brian Taylor had one. Hi, Brian. Tell me your idea.
Hi. My idea is to do away with passwords forever and use personal pictures to log into websites instead. Here's a simple example. And I've used a picture of my daughter and I on a Sunday afternoon ride out on a motorbikes, and I'm clicking on certain places that I've chosen, and that's logged me into the website. It's as simple as that. No more passwords.
But how do you turn an idea into a business?
We could improve CashTag's user experience by turning it as simple as it gets.
Shared seminar space, a shared office, mentorship, and even a boot camp. That's what's offered in this incubator or accelerator. Brian, tell me, is that why you came here?
Yeah, we moved specifically to London from Cheltenham. We had a technology strategy board grant, and this is essentially where everything's happening. So the business has grown through being here. We've got mentorship, we've got networking events, basically everything that we need.
But is that really everything that you need? Well, companies need money to grow. And that's where angel investors come in. They'll give you cash in exchange for a stake in your company. The big question is, how much to give away? Brian, how challenging is financing for a startup?
It's very challenging indeed. I invested £50,000 of my own money into the business, and I've subsequently raised finances through angel investors, and I've given away 32% of the business to do that.
Small businesses like these represent 99.9% of all private firms in Britain. Plus, they employ nearly 60% of the workforce and have been creating jobs at a double-digit pace since the recession ended. Many startups fail, but for now, they are an important part of the British recovery. Joining me today to talk about the entrepreneurial landscape here in London and in Europe are Easy Vidra, Head of Google for Entrepreneurs Europe. Dan Crow, Chief Technology Officer for Songkick, a startup focused on making it easier to find live music events. He previously founded a startup in Silicon Valley. And Jennifer Arcuri, founder of Innotech Summit, a startup that brings together policymakers, the private sector, and entrepreneurs. Welcome to the show to all of you. Dan, I'm going to start with you. What is that quality that you have that is different from somebody else who says, I don't know if I can start a company? What is your entrepreneurial secret?
Well, I don't know that there is really a great secret. I don't see myself as that different from anyone else. I think the one thing that entrepreneurs tend to have is an appetite for risk, for doing something that is a little bit, that might fail, that they're willing to go out there, try something new, and if it doesn't go well, get up, start again, and try something else. And so it's that feeling of, I want to do something that might change the world, and I'll take a risk to do that.
What about you, Easy? You've also founded companies. What is the entrepreneurial quality that you might have that differentiates you from somebody else who says, oh, maybe I won't take that leap?
I think for me personally, it was a need for experimentation and wanting to do something different. So I like taking little bets and see if they work out. So most recently, I founded Tech Bikers, which is a collaboration of the tech community to help support children's education through cycling. And this was just started as an idea. I put it out there on Twitter, and I got a few supporters. And then by talking to people that were willing to help, suddenly we managed to create something that is going to go global in 2014.
Jennifer, you are bringing together basically a whole bunch of policymakers and entrepreneurs to try and build, I suppose, that willingness of people to take that risk. But one thing that I always think is, what can you do to enable risk-taking? Because a lot of people might say, well, Dan and Easy have done it, but I don't know if I can give up my paycheck. What if I fail? What if I can't pay for my mortgage?
Yeah, that's what everybody feels. And even as an entrepreneur, sometimes you wake up and you're like, wait a minute, what am I doing, right?
They're both nodding.
you really are. You got a screw loose somewhere, but that's all right. I mean, the idea of just getting up and hustling, I mean, that's what I think is so inspiring to be around other like-minded people, because they share that drive, they get it, they get that half insaneness, and then when you strive to bring together all these different constituents, for one day to really rally the ecosystem, I think you can't help but feeling inspired. You get a high off of it.
What differentiates an idea from one that actually can make money and be a business?
Well, if I knew the answer to that, I'd be a much richer person than I am, I'm sure.
I'm not even going to ask you what you're worth.
No, not very much. No, look, I mean, part of the thing about startups is to understand that it is an experiment. I mean, he's exactly right, that experiment is the right way to think about it. Every startup is a gamble. You have an idea, you think maybe somebody's going to like this, and what you need to do is find out whether people actually want it. So what actually differentiates a good idea from a money-making one is whether people want that idea, whether you can find enough people around the world to pay you money for whatever it is you're doing, right? I mean, it's as simple as that. So what you really need is, it's not about the idea. This is what's really interesting. It's not about the idea, it's about the execution. Right. Are you able to go from the seed of something that has some signs that people like it, and then put in the hard work, persevere, go through the bad times as well as the good, and drive your way through to something that is actually a globally scaled business that lots and lots of people want to use? Do
you agree, Easy?
Yeah, Mark Andreessen, Silicon Valley venture capitalist, founder of Netscape and other companies, he said that the most important thing when you're starting a startup is product market fit. Most companies fail not because they failed to develop their product, but because they failed to develop their market or their customers. So you need to build something that people want, to Dan's point, and that means talking to customers. It doesn't mean just cooking the best product in the kitchen. You're not going to know that it's brilliant until people actually got a chance to try it.
I mean, Jennifer, scale is actually quite difficult for an individual entrepreneur to try and do, to test the market. So, I mean, what are some of the things that you would like to see in an ecosystem that would help? So, what London Silicon Roundabout, the other ecosystems have, what are the kind of key ingredients to make a hub entrepreneurial, to give them the kinds of things they need to make a business out of an idea?
Sure. Well, one of the things that I keep finding, and I'm sure you'll attest to this, that we meet so many entrepreneurs that are like, oh, we're fundraising. And it's like, go get your customers, go build your market. I mean, go build the buzz around it. And when I started InnoTech, it was not because I was out to build a British business. It kind of came as a default. I did this event during my MBA school, and suddenly everyone wanted more of it and more. And that drive, that hunger of that market is what fed me to build a business and, be so passionate about bringing together what it takes to be that, to build an ecosystem. And that scalability, I mean, product development people are crucial. Building a team with your founders, the EMI scheme that we have that allows our founders to all take part, and be a part of that company for the journey, because you really need that core team to grow the
Easy, you've located here, and why London? Why the London Silicon Roundabout? Why not the M4 corridor? Why not Europe?
Yeah, I think to answer your previous question, successful startup hubs need a little bit different things than successful startups. And what they need is essentially three components. One is environment, and I divide it into physical environment and kind of like the community or the maybe even spiritual environment of learning and collaboration. The other thing that they need, and this is very important, this is the answer to why London, is density. They need enough density of networks. Startups are designed to grow, and they need their extra partner, backer, founder, customer, user, they need more, basically. So that works particularly well where there's enough density. Doesn't mean that it can't work outside of capitals, but a city like London, which is a metropolitan, it's designed to bring this density on international talent, customers, etc. And finally, you need to have this secret element of serendipity or chance, and that happens, it's no secret, this happens when you get consistently a bunch of smart people together with passion into one place.
Yeah. All right, Dan, I'm going to make you confess something.
Okay.
Is being an entrepreneur, or CTO as you are now, hoping to develop a business, is it a 24/7 job? Do you work all the time? Do you ever switch off?
Well, I guess there's a part of my brain that's probably always thinking about it. But no, look, I have young children. I'm very lucky to be a father of twins, and it's incredibly important to me.
Very lucky, or
I'm extremely lucky. I love it. It's
sleep
great.
enough.
It's apart from it's the best thing that I do with my life. It's the best bit of my life. So, it's very important to me personally that I find time outside of work for my family, and that I'm a proper father. I don't, it's really important to me personally. So yes, it's not only possible, I think it actually makes me a better entrepreneur because I see life outside of the bubble of the company. I think you can become so obsessed and so kind of focused on the company that you don't see the bigger world outside it. And I'm building a company I hope that my children will grow up to enjoy using, and that gives me a much bigger time horizon and a much broader perspective on things, and I think that's valuable.
Jennifer, do you agree?
Yeah, well, I never shut off. I'm always working. I have no social life. It comes with the startup MO. And we only hang out with other startup people.
Yeah, you know all these guys.
Yeah,
Easy. What about you? 24/7 job?
I think that you can't fake passion, and if you're really passionate about something, you care about it. It's naturally comes to you. Yeah. So I shut off, but we're all guilty of looking at the phone way too many times, even in bed.
All right, very quickly in a final round, what is the biggest sacrifice you've made to start your own company, Jennifer?
Moving to England? No. Coming and being here and literally stopping everything just to build my hair fell out the first year I built the business, and that was a huge sacrifice for me. But I loved being in London, and I loved being here that much. That's what kept me here.
Easy.
Probably work-life balance.
Yeah.
It's heavier on the work side right now, but it also means that the moments you have with family you enjoy more because they're precious.
Dan?
Yeah, I think for me it's again, it goes back to that risk-taking, right? Every time you take a risk, there's something else that you're not doing. So it's all the things that I might have done that I haven't. But I don't know, I'm pretty happy where I am.
Thank you all very much indeed to my panelists for a great discussion, Jennifer Arcuri and Easy Vidra, and also Dan Crow. It's not just startups who thrive on being nimble. Big companies are also trying to instill that entrepreneurial spirit so as to stay ahead of the competition. SAP, one of the oldest and biggest software solutions providers, calls itself the world's biggest startup. I spoke to Jim Snabe, its co-CEO, to ask him how SAP sets itself apart.
So, I grew up on Greenland and learned skiing when I was very young. And skiing, there's one rule in skiing, downhill skiing, which is you always have to lean forward. Then you're in control, then you can steer. Whereas if you lean backwards and enjoy the moment, you often lose control. And it's a very good analogy to what happens in our industry. We are 41 years in the industry. Many of the companies that were around 20 years ago are not around today. So if you're not always leaning forward, always challenging yourself, always challenging your assumptions, and always having teams that are willing to do something unexpected and go with that, then you will be suddenly irrelevant, even if you're big. So it's not enough to be big, you need to be fast. And that's what we're trying to do. We've lived through 3 generations of radical shift of technology, and now we're on that 4th one where mobile, big data, and cloud become the new skills where we need to accelerate.
Is it possible to retain the best people who may want to go off and take their know-how and start the next cloud computing or next big data company? Because the one thing about big companies is that it is hard to show that you are the innovative one.
You're absolutely right. I think if there's one task in our business, which is the most important task, it is to attract and retain the best talents. That's the only asset we have, in fact. It's a very intelligence-oriented business that we're in, and we produce software that's imagined by people. So how do you do that? I think there are 2 things that matter. First of all, you need to be an attractive company, and with attractive today often means that you have a purpose, you have an impact in the world that is meaningful. People don't just have a job. I think they're part of a company where they feel they have a meaningful task. That in our case, we said we want to help the world run better. It sounds very fluffy, it sounds very big, but in fact we've been spending 40 years to help companies manage resources more effectively. And we do live in a world now of 7 billion people and scarce resources. So why wouldn't we be the company that helps the world manage this new growth with much more efficient ways of handling resources? So that's the first thing. And secondly, I do believe that many young people would like to be an entrepreneur. So the question we asked ourselves is, how can we create the biggest entrepreneurial company in the world? How can we be the biggest startup? Which means we foster a culture like a startup, but we give the benefit of scale, which most startups don't have.
I was once told by creative types that the key to being able to innovate in a company is minimizing the risk of failure. Because most innovators strike a balance between design, creativity, and functionality, but there's always an element of failure. How do you minimize the risk of failure in the world's biggest startup?
So the way we do that is not by trying to avoid risky projects. I think if you don't take on the risk, you'll never make a breakthrough in terms of innovation. So you have to take on even rather crazy projects and listen to rather crazy ideas and go with it. So how do we manage then the risk? We try and fail or succeed fast. So, you know, sometimes we get an idea, or an employee has an idea, we go with it, but we evaluate it very rapidly. And that means it either succeeds or fails fast. So we don't believe in the world which we used to have, where you run multi-year huge programs and you hope for success one day. In today's world, you can see the success. You should see the success very rapidly.
Jim Snape, co-CEO of SAP. But all companies, whether big or small, need an environment where people are willing to invest in them. But is the slow pace of recovery deterring investment and stifling their potential? What is holding back the economic recovery in the UK and Europe? Joining me to discuss this are Andrew Senton, Senior Economic Advisor to PwC. He was an external member of the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England from 2006 to 2011. And John Longworth, Director General of the British Chambers of Commerce, who represents thousands of businesses across Britain. Welcome to the show to both of you. John, let me start off with you. What is holding back business investment?
There's no question that business investment is being held back to some degree in the UK, and that's partly a rollover of lack of confidence from the economic situation prior to today. It looks, of course, that the economy is picking up a bit. Maybe it's good, but not good enough yet. That will, of course, affect sentiment, and it will be a self-fulfilling prophecy that business investment will rise very probably. But also access to finance is a big problem for British companies. We don't have a system in the UK of being able to access long-term patient capital from banks, nor do we have ready access to working capital, particularly for relatively new and fast-growing companies, and also for companies that have maybe run down their capital reserves during the recession and are now ready to fulfill orders again. I go around the country and I actually find companies who are literally turning down orders from overseas because they simply haven't got the working capital to invest and fulfill those orders. So it's a big problem of a long-term structural failure in business finance in the UK, that the only alternative is equity investment for these businesses. And of course, if equity is involved, you then on a sellout programme, so we don't have the mid-sized business sector developing in the way that it should.
Andrew.
Well, I think at this stage of the cycle, we shouldn't expect investment to be too strong. It takes a while for businesses to take up the spare capacity that they have. And that's probably been compounded by the fact that growth is much slower than it was before the financial crisis. And some of the sources of growth that we had before the financial crisis, like a very buoyant financial sector, consumer spending, which relied on people being able to borrow quite heavily, those sources of growth have gone away, and the new sources of growth are from emerging markets, from exports, benefiting different types of companies from the ones that benefited before the crisis. So there's been a big shift in the economy. There's been relatively slow growth, and I think there's still quite a lot of uncertainty in the business world about making commitments for the longer term and putting down investment in a very significant way.
What do you think is both of you mentioned uncertainty, what do you think is the biggest source of uncertainty that's affecting confidence? Is it government policy? Is it, what is it when you speak to businesses that they're most concerned about? So therefore they'll say, I don't know if I'm going to put in this big investment for the next few years.
Well, in the UK, we've seen quite a big change in the consumer environment, and consumers are obviously a very big part of the domestic market here in the UK. Consumer spending grew by over 3.5% for a quarter of a century, until 2007, and recently it's been growing at, in a good year by about 1%. So there's been a big change in the consumer environment, which companies that serve the UK consumer obviously are having to adapt to that and reorientate themselves. That's one source of uncertainty. I think the other source of uncertainty is just the amount of volatility we've had from all sorts of different sources since the financial crisis. Obviously the financial crisis itself was a big shock. We've also had the Euro crisis. We've had other shifts in the international markets, sources of volatility, and all those things make businesses nervous.
John, do you agree?
I agree broadly with that. Certainly businesses like certainty if they're going to start to invest for the future. I mean, we have low interest rates in the UK at the moment, which is a good thing, and long may they continue. And that's actually encouraging businesses to think about investment, because the idea that interest rates may remain low for some time gives them confidence that there will be increased consumer spending, and also that any borrowing that they undertake will be at relatively low rates of return. Of course, our business surveys also show that there are external factors still on the horizon that worry businesses. The number one external factor for businesses is the Eurozone crisis, which businesses have recognised is still not over. I mean, the Eurozone is still a pack of cards, which is being propped up effectively by investment from Germany, and it's still not certain how that will all unravel in the end.
Are you hearing from your members that the debate over whether the UK should stay in the EU is one source of uncertainty they're concerned about?
They certainly would prefer there to be more certainty around that debate. Quite a number of our businesses, a good plurality of businesses, want the referendum to be earlier than the declared date, in order that there is more certainty around what the outcome might be. Certainly the vast majority of businesses actually want a referendum, so actually they've already accepted the fact that there is a level of uncertainty and discounted it. We have some very clear views in the businesses in our network that they actually believe the Prime Minister's position on Europe is correct, that there should be renegotiation in order to get reform of the European Union.
Sounds like there's a lot the government actually does need to sort out. We might have to have that conversation another time. Thank you all very much indeed. So the catch-22 is that the slow recovery deters firms from investing. Well, firms are reluctant to invest, perhaps because of tepid growth. But for those who are willing to take the leap, becoming an entrepreneur can be fulfilling. That's all we have time for this week. I'd like to thank my panelists, Andrew Sentence and John Longworth. Check out our website and me on Twitter. That's @Linda Yueh. And join us next week for more Talking Business with me, Linda Yueh.